for a woman to be able to generate on her own, I think is very powerful, because when you know that no matter what you can generate, you know how to make money, you know how to organize and care for yourself financially, this is important. Hello, my loves. Welcome to another episode of Natalia Benson, the podcast. It is so good to be with you again. I am very, very excited. I don't know why. It feels like I've lived like 20 lifetimes since the last time I recorded an episode. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's because I traveled. I went to Paris, and that was quite a trip. If you were with me over on Instagram, I am considering doing an episode about it because it was so multifaceted. It was so powerful. First time I've actually gone overseas since I was in my early 20s. So it was really quite powerful to travel as a 38-year-old and all of the life and different things I've experienced over the past, let me do the math in my head. Wow. Oh my God. 17 years. Holy crap. That's a long time. I feel like I went to Paris and Spain and England, like between the ages of like 21 and 24. So just such a different human, you know? So it was powerful. Let's see if we bring an episode forward about that. I think it would be a really beautiful thing to talk about. But I'm very excited to dive into today's episode. If you were with me in my first episode back after my year-long break, I released an episode on April 17th of this year, which was my birthday. And that was all about my rebirth after divorce. Well, I'm doing essentially a part 2 to that because it has been, February 7th, it will have been a year since I was separated from my ex-husband. And to say, even just in the last 6 months, the growth, the healing, the transformation that I've been stepping into, it's been remarkable. And it was really cute because I just think we all get to remember that healing is non-linear, and time, there's always been like a saying that I love, but like time heals all wounds. It's true. It's like if you think about a wound on your body, the only thing that really heals a wound is time and care. And that goes for emotional wounds as well. And, wounds of the heart. And this was a wounding for me. Like, even though on so many levels, I'm going to talk about this, like, I'm actually very grateful that this happened. It doesn't mean that it still hasn't hurt. And Friday night was Halloween, and I had a really beautiful breakthrough that night, actually, because I really came to this place where I was like, wow, I just so enjoy my own company. What did I do on Friday? I started my cycle. I'm like very, very into syncing my life and my business with my cycle. I've been into that for a couple of years, but I have to say that lately it has become even more pronounced. I don't know if maybe it's because I'm getting older or I'm just more grounded in my body. I'm not completely sure, but I will say that syncing my life and caring for my hormones through the cyclical nature of my cycle has been so incredibly powerful, and caring for my energy and my body. So I started my cycle on Friday, right on time. And it happened to be Halloween. And as a Capricorn ascendant, I wouldn't really say I'm a Halloween person. I don't really do costume stuff. I wonder if I ever end up, having like a partner and family. I think I'll get more into it. Maybe as an Aries, like my childlike energy will come out if I'm around, my own children or children en masse with that era of my life. But for now, I really don't ever dress up. I just don't do things like that. I don't know if I think it's like the effort or investing in things that like I'm going to wear like never again. There's something impractical about it. It's like so funny. And I wanted to do a poll actually on Friday and be like, who is the the zodiac sign like least likely to dress up. And my joke is that it's always like Capricorns or Capricorn risings. And if any of my Cappies are listening or Cap risings are listening and they're like, I dressed up to the nines, then please DM me and let me know, or let me know if my thought process about this is on the money. But very simply, all of that to say, I feel like I just spent time with myself. I spent the afternoon with one of my best friends. We hadn't seen each other for a while, and we needed to talk about some things about our relationship. So we just like sat down together, and it was just such a beautiful afternoon. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go get a Goop pizza, which is my favorite. I don't eat cheese, so it's a cheeseless pizza. I know that sounds insane, but it's so good. Don't knock it if you haven't tried it. And then I was like, I'm going to come home and just be tired and be on my cycle and like watch the end of Starting Five, which is a basketball documentary. It's a docuseries actually on Netflix. And I just love it. This is my second time watching the series. And every time I watch the series, you know that I'm looking up their astrology. I'm always curious, like, what are the ley lines with athletes? Like, are they mostly cardinal signs? The main guy in it, I'm already forgetting his name, but he was so wonderful. He was a Cancer. He was the MVP. His team won the whole series finals. And it was just fun. Like I'm giving you all these cutie little details, but all I really want to say is that I'm moving into this era right now where I am so authentically enjoying and loving my own company. And, with all of that being said, I don't know why my voice just cracked. Is there my throat chakra is like, there's more to say, of course, but very simply, it's very interesting because I feel like Friday it's like, I could have been in a place of like, oh, I'm, not out on Halloween or whatever. And I was just like, I could care less. I was like, I am so happy. I love my apartment. I love spending time with myself. And I know my interests. I feel like something has been occurring for me lately and healing, because a divorce, yes, it's a divorce, but it's like a breakup. And in this instance, it was a breakup of my entire life and everything that I thought was going to be coming around the bend for me. And it's interesting because at the beginning of the year, I remember my ex and I were taking a walk. This is when we lived together and we owned a home together. We lived in the desert and we were out on a walk. He was a Capricorn, also Cap rising like me. And we really like to like plan things together. So we were just like we were in this mode of just like planning. We were planning our trips. We were planning like what the year was going to look like. And my guides were talking to me a lot then, and I heard them very clearly. They said two things to me multiple times. They said, this one of them is a little ironic and interesting, and it's a little tough to share, but I'm going to share it. But the first one is they kept saying, there's like a saying in Yiddish. My grandparents used to say it, but they'd say it to me in English. If you want to make God laugh, make plans. That might be a Yiddish saying. That might be like a Jewish saying. I'm not sure. But anyhow, it's a wise saying. If you want to make God laugh, make plans. And I kept hearing that over and over every time Mick and I would be talking about making plans. It would be like, if you want to make God laugh, make plans. And I was like, why am I hearing that? I was like, I don't think I like that I'm hearing that. And then it's really interesting because the week that we decided to divorce, which was a mutual decision, I also kept hearing second marriage in my head. And I was like, what the frick? And, I didn't know I was about to get divorced, but I kept hearing second marriage. And I don't know if you babes, I'm sure you have, if you have yet to delineate how the voice of your guide sounds, it's very fascinating. So I really heard there was a lot of clamoring, let's say, and I was definitely receiving information. And the reason this at least is true for me, the reason I knew that, looking back on it, I'd say in hindsight that this was like psychic information was really because I didn't have any response to it. And I remember reading a book, I think it was called Psychic Witch. I don't recall the author at this moment, but I just remember him saying that you can interpret and understand what is psychic information, AKA real information, because you don't have like an egoic emotional response to it. I don't know if you babes have ever heard that or you agree with that in your own experience, but I always thought that was quite fascinating. Like when you're receiving like authentic psychic information from, whether it's your higher self, your spiritual team, like God universe itself, herself, himself, it's fascinating to hear and understand like, wow, I'm not having some kind of emotive response to this. It's just like very plain information. And that's at least how it comes through for me. I'd be so curious how it comes through for you. So I also want to share that, today's actually a really powerful day. Today would have been my dad's 79th birthday. So I am recording on my daddy's birthday. And for those of you who are curious, or maybe you're just meeting me, I'm going to give you a little backstory of my year and what I've moved through in the last year. And I really want to get into this episode, just again, our rebirth after divorce. What does it look like for our finances? What does it look like for our sense of wholeness? And the reason I wanted to talk about this specifically, it's just, this has been a conversation I'm having with a lot of different women lately, whether it's women that I'm meeting IRL or women that I'm meeting in passing or women in the NB community and who are aware that, I'm divorced. It's really coming through the beauty of this transition, the absolute pain and anguish of the transition, and then at that practical, tactical, the challenge financially. And what I'm finding is sometimes for women, it's not just how am I going to make up for the loss of this contributing partner. For a lot of women, I'm finding as well, it's like, oh man, I'm going to be getting some form of alimony or payment, and I have never touched the finances. So I want to just talk about everything today. I actually did a masterclass. It was more of like a money chat back in, I believe it was the spring. And I wanted to talk about this, just like a really candid conversation of women and finances after divorce, separation, or a breakup. And how, this has at least been something that's been really important for me and important in my work. I have wanted to really demystify the conversation around money for women, because what I find so often is that a lot of women, they stay in relationships, whether it's a marriage or a partnership, maybe because they don't feel like they can do it on their own. And I'm not saying that that's every scenario, but it is absolutely a factor for a lot of women. So I'm excited to talk about all of this, and I'll really just be speaking about it from my own vantage point. And my only prayer and intention with a conversation like this is that it is really helpful. And if you are listening and you know someone that you think could be served by this episode, I would just be honored if you could share it with them. So I want to just say one more time, it's my Poppy Bears. It would have been my daddy's birthday today. He's a Scorpio. I miss him so much. The grief some days just hits me so painfully. And then some days I'm just like in awe at the fun ways that he communicates with me. So it's been quite a journey. So just to give a little backstory, especially if you're newer with me, or maybe someone sent you this episode and you're like, what is going on? So very, very simply, just my last year. So I turned 38 this year, and last year in Virgo season, I was about 37, about to be 37 and a half. I lost my dad to cancer. And then about 5 months later, I also got divorced. So I did a series last year on death and grief and astrology, and just like really got into some really powerful esoteric, like my mediumship ability and just different things like that, that really has softened my grief process quite a lot. In addition, moving with the divorce piece, that has really grounded me. So I feel like my dad's death has emotionally matured me in ways that I don't know that I ever could have accessed without his passing. And I am definitely not insinuating that you need to have the loss of a parent to emotionally mature. However, in my case, that was what really woke me up and really transformed me on a lot of levels. So I feel like with my dad's passing, it was like this deepening of me emotionally, this deepening of my personality, this deepening of my sense of spiritual depth and emotional intelligence, because it was just so painful. And then moving over into my divorce, I feel like that really deepened me in a real world sense. That woke me up from a lot of like the Disney stuff that I grew up with, because looking back on my relationship, and I've been doing a lot of like history and inventory on not only my relationship and my part in it, but also my relationship history in general. Because if I'm not willing to look in a grounded, practical sense as to what my part of the relationship was and what my part has been in all of my relationships or situationships, then I will repeat the same patterns, because what I'm finding is that everything in life is patterning. And a lot of times we do the same stuff because we are just living in an unconscious pattern, or sometimes we're living in a pattern that is very conscious and it's just comfortable. Sips matcha. This is my new thing lately. Scorpio season. I'm really into matcha all of a sudden. I've always liked matcha. I'm like, what is going on? I am really, really into matcha. But what I will say is like the divorce and the release of my relationship deepened me in a worldly sense, or maybe worldly isn't the word, but it definitely matured me in a practical, tactical sense. Because when I look at the contributing factors, both with my ex-partner and myself, and why the relationship deteriorated and why I know that we both overlooked a lot of stuff. You know, I heard something, and then I want to segue into a couple different things here, but that was essentially circumventing around the idea that love is not enough to make a healthy, great partnership. It's just not. And I have to say, like, if that lands roughly with you, explore that, because I have, for me and my lived experience, makes a lot of sense, because love wasn't the issue in my last relationship, or really in many of my interactions with men and guys and men I've been involved with in my life. The gift is that there's been love, there's been connectivity, there's been fondness, but the truth is, and what I found is that that isn't enough to make a partnership, because you have to, this is at least, again, my lived experience, and definitely what I'm looking to create moving forward in this part of my life. But it's like, you have to be there. Yes, love, yes, respect, yes, connectivity, yes, fondness, yes. But there has to be like shared values, shared vision. There has to be polarity. Like, these are at least what's important to me. And polarity is like energetics. And polarity is also rooted, I think, in energetic health and wholeness. And what I found is that I was so focused on what was good in one area that I was willing to allow the other things, because I talked about this in the first episode, we just really could not get on the same page. Like, where do we want to live? And I found myself like very Venus and Pisces of me, but I really found myself sort of giving up like what it was that I actually wanted just so I could maintain the relationship. And that creates resentment because that was literally cultivating a lot of different dynamics between my ex and I that were very unspoken, that were just not, they just weren't working. They were not working for us. And one thing that I'll say is like, this is a conversation that's also been coming up. It's like, how do you know when something is complete? Because I think I mentioned this, like, you know, where I was like a year ago at this time, I was devastated at the idea of not having my relationship. It was very frightening to me. And I realized I had just sourced so much safety and so much of my identity in being like a chosen woman. And I was willing to ignore so many things about what I actually wanted and what actually felt important to me just to maintain the facade, both for myself, for him, and for the world, whatever the world was. Maybe it was my family, maybe it was my community, maybe it was my friends. And I don't know who that speaks to, but especially when there's something I wanted to like explore. You know, I, again, in doing my relationship history and looking at my journey in this part of my life, I went through and explored every single relationship, situationship, like sexual partner that I've ever had. And I wrote out my actual objective experience of each thing. So I could start to see, where do I disassociate? Where am I trying to escape? Where, if ever, have I really been in something where someone like really actually feels like a true total match for me? And where also am I actually contributing? And this has been one of the most fascinating and also very, very, very confronting things, because it takes two to tango. The only thing I don't love that I'm seeing lately on the Grammy Poo Instagram is just like some of this content. I'm training my algo where it's just like blaming men. Like my at least personal relationship to this is, yes, I understand as someone who's been engaged with, you know, when I was younger, boys and then guys and then men, I get it. But also women have the gift of discernment, and we also have the gift, which is also a beautiful opportunity, choice, privilege to choose who we partner with or who we engage with. And we have to be in our body awareness. And this is a whole deeper conversation. But the reason I bring it forward is because a conversation that's been coming up a lot is like, when is it the right time to leave? Because when I look back on photos of me and my history and my dating experiences and my relationships, which I haven't been in very many, I started noticing that most times when I was with a man, I would, based on my choice or allowing them to choose me and me not making a conscious choice, a lot of this was very unconscious for me, especially when I just let myself sort of be swept into something, I would get very energetically depleted. And this would come out in like photos, especially like when I would look at myself, I'd be like, whoa, I can really see how misaligned and out of alignment I am. And so I had a client ask me, when do you know it's time? Because it's a very big deal to let go of a relationship. It can be honestly frightening for a lot of reasons. The financial is just one of them. But emotionally and your identity and so many different things, whether you're married or you're in, a long-term relationship with someone, it's a grief, it's a death. But what I shared with her specifically is I was like, well, when all the energy leaves your body and when you actually attune to how you're actually doing and you can honestly, earnestly say that like you're not well, there are going to be seasons in relationships that are hard, but that's a given because human interaction is complex. However, I just know from my journey on this earth that I feel very strongly that when I have known so many times when something was truly not right for me, and when I'm in my head making excuses or I'm in fear, that's how I know that some part of me is trying to preserve the status quo. And, in this instance, in my divorce, I didn't have a choice. I actually didn't have a choice. I did, of course, because we always do, but this had to happen. This just had to happen. And I know that it had to happen for both me and my ex to be free to pursue the paths and perhaps even the partners that are better suited. And that's where I see this sort of devolving of a relationship as an absolute gift. And it doesn't feel like that in the moment. And I've had, you babes know my story, but I've had moments where I've been on the floor over this because it's a loss of identity. It's a fear. It's where am I going? But the deeper recently that I've been in healing, I don't have moments on the floor anymore. I just don't. I see my part in the dynamic. I see the choices that I made that made this relationship move in the direction that it did. Some of them that I'm not proud of. It's mostly me being not a healthy communicator. I just never was in like a mature relationship before. I just really wasn't. This person was the first person for me as an adult. I met him when I was 31 that I ever engaged with in a way that was even moderately mature. And that's just me personally. And I speak into this candidly because I think it gives each of us an opportunity, even when something is over, just to look at our part, whatever it may be. Because when we can do that, we liberate ourselves. We get out of blame. We get out of hatred. Because even with the completion of something, there is always, always, always going to be a silver lining for you. I promise. Whether you see it immediately, which I didn't. I did not. This is, I don't know, where am I at here? If we got divorced on February 7th, I suppose I'm at about, it's been 9 months. So in 3 months, it'll have been a year. And I'm getting to a place where it's like, wow, I really see and I really honor like why this needed to happen, not just for me, but for this person too. And I'm happy. I want to be happy, and I authentically want this person to be happy and well-adjusted. And I had a conversation with a best friend recently where I was like, even with friendships that I've had leave my life and friendship breakups, friendship divorces, I'm like, you should always, this is at least my perspective, you should always pray and wish well for the people who you have like released from your life or have released you from their life. Even like when I have issues with people, someone doesn't like something that I've done and we create distance, or maybe it's something in business. It's like, I think wishing well for people, especially who maybe don't like you or you don't like, is a really great approach to life. Because why do you want more tension and friction and like enemies, frankly? That's a very strong word, but it's like, why? It's like when you can wish happiness and wholeness and wellness, even for people that you no longer connect with or get along with. I don't know. I wonder if the world could be a little more peaceful instead of just wanting people to like like not be okay because you and them don't like each other anymore, whether that's romantic or friendship or a business relationship. I'm curious. I'd love to hear your thoughts too. Please DM me. I love to hear you. I've been hearing from you angels recently. When you message me about something you like from the pod, it literally makes my life. So thank you for doing that if you do. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and like your perspective on this. And if you don't know my IG, it's just at Natalia_Benson. I'd love to hear from you and I love you very much. So let's switch gears a little bit into the financial realm. We've definitely talked about the completion, trusting your body. Because when I look at like even like photos of myself a year ago when I was in this relationship, I was just holding a lot of stress because I was not listening to myself. I was not listening to what I wanted. We had done IVF. I did not want to do IVF. I think I also knew that we were not equipped to be parents together. But again, I was ignoring. It's very hard for me to speak into that because it's a little shameful, but it's just honestly where I was. And I continue to forgive and love the part of me who just thought that she needed to disassociate from her needs to be loved and to have connection and to keep a relationship. So I forgive that part of myself. But I think trusting our body when we know a relationship is over is a really, really powerful thing. And I feel like I lost my train of thought for a moment, but it's sort of like you have to discern between what is just a tough season with a person that you authentically want to evolve with, because that is going to be a given in relationships, especially long-term relationships from what I've experienced, versus what are actual deal breakers, like we're not on the same page. These are thoughts and things that have come through for me, just really exploring and thinking really deeply about this part of my life. So when we consider like stepping into our well-being with our wealth, spiritual and energetic wholeness, especially with the release of a relationship or a divorce, there's a few things. I think let's talk about the financial and then let's talk about like the energetic and like the spiritual side of this too. So with the financial piece, you have to be prepared and you have to be organized. So I am very, very passionate about women being able to generate for themselves. Like, I think that's a really important skill to have, no matter what. Even if you are in a relationship where maybe you don't have to financially contribute, I definitely have the awareness that that is something that happens. I've always been in experiences where it was like, there's a 50-50 contribution. But one thing that I will say is no matter the dynamic that you're in, it is very, very important to know how to generate, even if you're in the scenario where you don't necessarily have to. And that to me, I feel like it's important, even if it's a small amount, whatever that means to you. Money is very subjective and relative. What one person feels is a lot of money could be a very small amount of money to another person. That's just the unique aspect of finances. But one thing that I will say is like for a woman to be able to generate on her own, I think is very powerful, because when you know that no matter what you can generate, you know how to make money, you know how to organize and care for yourself financially, this is important. So there's two actual things in your astrology that also point to this. Your Venus placement is very, very powerful with this, and your Jupiter placement is very, very powerful for this. It really gets to be from the space of your Jupiter placement is like your purpose and what you're here to generate through. And your Venus is your magnetic, receptive, abundance activating placement. And I suggest these are things that you get to know, especially if you feel a little stuck with your generative capacity. or you want it to be more aligned. Maybe you already know how to make money, but you want to align a little more deeply with your soul and with feeling fulfilled in how you make money. That's definitely a conversation I've had with a lot of women recently where they're like, I know how to generate and I generate well, but I want to actually be able to generate from a place where I feel more like on purpose. Like I feel like I'm actually generating from a place in a space that feels aligned and fulfilling. So knowing how to generate is important. And then knowing how to organize your finances is important. So these are all things that I teach. MWMM, we go really deeply into the money astrology piece. That's my personal finance and astrology membership. And in terms of just like financial preparedness or financial organization, I teach a simple system in there as well of how to organize and care for your finances. These things are important. I have a lot of episodes recently where I've talked about more in the minutia of exactly how to get financially organized, money tracking, knowing your debt, tracking your assets. These things all sound, multi-bank account, money management, knowing how to allocate, knowing how to stabilize your bank account. So it's like you actually have a cushion. That is really one of the deep benefits of doing multi-bank account management is you actually because you have organization and clarity with what your money is doing, you can actually start to build. So it's quite fascinating and quite powerful and empowering. I won't get into the minutia of that right now, but if you want to join me for MWMM, we can get into the nitty gritty. You also can tune into lots of episodes on this here podcast where I get into the minutia of my money system. If you did not know, I also have a YouTube. The most recent episode, we actually put up one of my master classes. So if you want to get a little more familiar with like my money work, you can watch that masterclass on YouTube. It's called the Stability Method. And very, very soon we'll actually be adding more of my past masterclasses on the YouTube. And those are fun because they're a little more bite-sized, but you get to get into more of the tools and the techniques around like how I teach money and how I fuse money with astrology. So I just want to bring your awareness to the fact that taking care of your money, it doesn't have to be hard. I always like to say that the hardest thing with it is going to be your own resistance. That's usually the hardest thing with anything personal finance related. It's literally your resistance. You are so capable and so brilliant to understand and to get this stuff. So that's good, beautiful news. It's not that it's over your head because of lack of capability. A lot of times it's just being willing to get good at something that maybe you don't feel naturally very, very good at. And this is important because I just think having financial acumen, like having an attunement to money and how to make money and how to take care of money is a really important thing in this world so that you have the power of choice in your life, in your relationships. You can say yes or no to situations. You can say yes or no to relationships. You can say yes or no to dating advances because no matter what, women, from what I understand, we were only, at least in the United States, we were only able to get access to a credit card, I think in the late 80s. I was born in the late 80s and, I'll be 40 soon. That's not a very long time ago. That's pretty wild. It's just a couple decades ago that women could not even open a credit card or I believe get a mortgage in their own name. So we have to also look at this work as a part of our evolution as well, of just how to care for ourselves in a world that runs on financial. You need to be financially well. It's very important. A book that I also love, a couple books that I love around this is Build Your Money Machine by Mel Abraham and Secrets of a Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. Those are two of my favorite money books if you are curious. And I think they're important reads. Okay, so I want to start to land this a little bit. I think one of the most profound aspects of the conversation around divorce, stepping into wealth, stepping into wholeness is that to decide to leave a relationship is also like a total metamorphosis, because very often divorce, no matter how aligned or healthy or ultimately good the decision is, it still registers as grief. It still registers as a death of sorts. And to allow ourselves the spaciousness to grieve and to feel is essentially an invitation to spiritually evolve. What I find, and I'm curious your babe's experience with this, especially if you have gone through a divorce, is if you found that there was like a deliverance where you were able to ascend or move into a more authentic expression of who you came here to be. I don't want to project my experience as the only experience of divorce. I think on a lot of levels, I've had a couple of my best friends say this to me where they're like, you've had one of the most peaceful divorces I've ever seen. And I think it's because me and this person, we were on the same page. And we had a friendship at the core of our relationship that when it was all said and done, we didn't want to make the other person suffer. And I know that I've seen that. I've heard about this. I've seen it obviously in the media. It's definitely can be par for the course. No matter what, my prayer is that no matter if on the spectrum of divorce, there was ease or there was extreme challenge and pain, my prayer is that the release of a relationship when you know that it is right, and even if you don't know if it's right yet, that you can see that this is a pathway for your evolution as a soul and as a person. I talked about this in an episode, a recent episode. I'm spacing right now on which one it was, but I talked about the vertex. I learned more about this on the Pattern app recently, something I'd heard about studying astrology over the years, but it was never anything I got really into. But the vertex is a really powerful fate point. And when you have an aligned vertex with another person, something that's quite powerful is that the idea is that it's like a fated encounter, meaning it may not be that you're there to walk with one another your entire journey, or maybe you are, maybe you're fated to do that. But the quality of fate with the vertex is that it will be a very powerful, transformatory journey through this relationship. And what you can find, whether you use astro.com or Ephemeris, you can actually set up your natal vertex and the transit vertex. And you can see, because the idea is that when planets pass over or aspect your vertex, those are very important fated events in the evolution of your soul. And what's really fascinating is that natally, I think I talked about this in that episode, but my ex and I had a 1 degree conjunct vertex in our 7th house of marriage in Leo. And I went to ChatGPT and I was like, what does it mean if I got a divorce and this person and I had a 1 degree conjunct vertex, which is a very, very tight conjunction in Leo in the 7th house of marriage? And ChatGPT said that essentially the release of that marriage and partnership, which is what the 7th house is about, would mean that each of you could more fully pursue who you are here to actually be, which is Leo. And when I read that, and of course I'm synthesizing it to a sentence, but when I read that synthesis by ChatGPT, I wept because it dropped so deeply in my heart of just like, holy crap, because that's exactly what it was for me. It was like the release of this relationship, it has allowed me to be and live as who I came here to be. And when I talk, I had a conversation with a mentor of mine recently that was so beautiful. And she was reflecting on her divorce, which her divorce happened quite a long time ago. But she was saying, when I think about like where me and my ex-husband are now, so many years later, and they have children. She's like, we both are so remarkably clear that, you know, during our relationship, we had an extremely unhealthy, like codependent dynamic, but now like we can co-parent and we are so much better in the scenario that we are in now. Like we're not meant to be in a relationship with one another. And so I want to just take a moment and honor, you know, you who are listening to this. Obviously, if you listened all the way to the end, then something about this was resonant. But what I will say is very, very simply that wherever you land on the spectrum with this, maybe you are considering a divorce, maybe you are divorced, maybe you're long time divorced or separated, or you're going through a breakup or considering a breakup. My deep prayer for you is that in perfect timing, you get to have the experience of the perfection of what you're going through. I know that the day that I got divorced, which was 4 years to the day that we had gotten engaged, the exact day, I remember laying on the couch and I was like crying. And I was like, God, I just spoke to God very clearly. And I just said, God, please show me that I'm going to be okay. Like, please show me that this is like, I'm trusting you. I'm trusting you. And I feel like through this journey and where I sit today on my dad's birthday, would have been my dad's birthday. I'm very grateful for this year. I've gone through more pain and suffering this year than in, I think, any year of my life between 2024 and 2025. But to get to experience the woman and the peace of where I am, and it has been hard fought. It is not just, it's not here for no reason. It's here because I've really been showing up to figure out how to be a better and healthier version of myself. And it's just worth it. I always like to say that the work is worth it. You are worth the work. And if you can see and witness the perfection in what it is that you're going through, or maybe even the bumpy transition that you will go through if you're considering divorce, I think it's knowing that one day you will have a moment where everything will make sense and you'll understand. I'm going to leave you with this story, and I'd love to hear from you, angels, just how this episode landed and your thoughts. I really, really would. So please send me a DM at Natalia_Benson. But, you know, 3 months to my dad's death date, so this was back in June, I had to get cavities filled. And I didn't know that the masseter, I'd never had numbing before. Not pleasant. And I'd kind of been avoiding doing anything unpleasant. I think that can be sort of a, it was a me thing at the time. And just, I think I'd gone through so much discomfort for so many years that I was like, oh, I just was in pleasure town. I was like, let me drink my matchas, let me sleep in, let me be in like dopamine dump all day. That was where I was at the time. And for me to make this decision to get my cavities filled that day was a mature, healthy decision because my teeth were bothering me, but I didn't want to do it. And it's interesting because I was like, okay, today's the day, Natalia. Like, it's just the day to get your cavities filled. I'm sorry. Let's do it. And so I literally got this shot, which was just the worst. And I was so numb all day. And I didn't know this, but you babes actually helped me with this on Instagram. But a couple babes had told me that the masseter is essentially the masseter like rules like survival and like energetics of survival and grief. I didn't know that. So I'm getting this freaking thing done. And I had probably had so much stored grief because, like I said, I was in like dopamine dumping then. Like that was just where I was. And that can happen after you go through really intense, challenging periods. I was like, I just need ease. I was very checked out, honestly, on a lot of levels. I talked about that in my rituals episode, which is a couple episodes back, and how I came out of that. Beautiful episode to listen to if you want to get to know what I do on a regular basis take care of myself in a grief season, and why I feel like I am thriving. And it's really because of the way I've been caring for myself, both internally and externally. But what I'll say is that that day, it was so perfect. I went home and I just realized that all I needed to do was sit on the couch, put in my AirPods, listen to my grief playlist, and let her rip. And I wailed by myself. I think I closed the blinds of my apartment. I was like, let's just close the window shades so I can just go in. And I let myself, I mean, it was like a emotional, I don't want to sound crazy dramatic, but it was like an emotional, I don't like the word I was going to use. I'm going to just say it was a fucking deep emotional excavation. I'll use the F word to I don't cuss much anymore. I don't know if you guys have noticed. I don't cuss as much anymore. Unless I really need to, but it was horrendous. And I couldn't believe how much pain was coursing through me emotionally. And imagine being that numb and like crying that much. Like it was intense. But I have pictures of myself after that, and I look like a different person. Because it was like I had to let myself feel my deep disappointment around my dad, around our relationship, which was not perfect. And it did not, also the end of my dad's life, we didn't really get to talk. The last conversation I ever had with him was, oh man, like I never really got to say goodbye. And he was very resistant. His Scorpio was like resistant, and so we didn't really get the opportunity, and then he declined, and then that was completion of his earthly time. So I let that course through, and then I got to let the deep disappointment of my divorce move through me, and I got to be with it. And it was not easy, but it was worth it. It was worth it. And I believe the emotional healing we allow ourselves to do as best we can, given our circumstances, it gives us the energetic spaciousness to do the things that we then need to do to care for our lives. Because rarely is a divorce or a death ever so simple. There are earthly things to take care of. And, I've shared with you, babes, like I've had this business for a long time, and fortunately it really has been here to care for me. So thank you. But it's been powerful because it's not like when I really got grounded and I really got accountable to what I needed to do to take care of things, it was like, oh my God, I have a lot to focus on and I need to stop avoiding, and I've got to really drop in. And fortunately, I feel like my journey with my health, my body, my vitality, doing my body recomposition journey, all of that was like the anchor for me to get really real about what it was going to take and what it is that I needed to do to heal emotionally, and then also continue to care for my business and take good care of my finances, and also to get clear on what it is that I want to do. I went on a little tangent cuteness, but I'm going to end with this. The reason I just told you that story is because when I was wailing, I got my journal out and I journaled. I journaled all my fears. I journaled all my pain. I journaled all my disappointment. And then I allowed like my higher self to write to me. And in my tears and in the music and in everything that I was going through, I literally just kept writing over and over and over and over again. One day this will all make sense. One day this will all make sense. One day this will all make sense. And that's why I want to tell you that story about my dentist journey, because going into that and letting myself grieve, it's almost like it broke open to this higher wisdom that was like, one day you're going to understand why you're experiencing all of this and why it all happened at once. One day it will all make sense. And so if you're listening to this and it doesn't feel like it makes sense, my prayer, my angel, is that one day it all makes sense. I love you, beauties. Hopefully this episode wasn't too all over the place. This was an honor to get to share a little update, some wisdom, some different ideas and things that have been coming through me in this season. And I think what I want to leave you with is just the gift of discernment, the gift of caring for yourself, the gift of spiritual evolution through challenge, and really just the power of who you are and knowing your capability, even with things that you think that you cannot survive or that you cannot make it through. You can, and you will. I love you. Thank you for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye-bye.